Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. This is BRN AM for Monday, September 9th, 2019. Here are your headlines. 18% of home healthcare workers earn below the federal poverty line. And small businesses in California face a tight competitive labor market. What does that mean for employee benefits? Joining me now to discuss is Senior Financial Services Editor from LinkedIn, Devin Banerjee. Devin, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
So we're going to call this segment Social Media Monday. Get it? M Media Monday. And very pleased to welcome you back. You know, LinkedIn obviously is one of the largest social media platforms. So, you know, a lot of people are talking about a lot of things. In my lead up to our discussion, I was talking about home healthcare workers. And I know this is an issue that you and the LinkedIn folks are tracking in terms of discussions.
We saw such a passionate, even vigorous conversation about this topic last week, Jeff. We featured a story, excellent story in the New York Times about the absolute boom in home health workers. There are about 2.3 million of them in the US right now. That's actually up 2.5 times. It's up 150% in just the past decade, which really follows this demographic trend of aging baby boomers here in the US. And, you know, we called this the most demanding job in America today. And it's not just, you know, mentally demanding, personally demanding, even physically demanding. I mean, these people are part housekeepers, part dietitians, you know, part social workers, part diaper changers, etc. So it's not just demanding in that way. It's also one of the lower paid jobs we're seeing in America. It pays about, on average, about $11.52 an hour right now. And so that really follows this trend, Jeff, that you and I have talked about lately, which is high demand jobs are actually not seeing that pickup in wages that you would expect with such a high demand job. And we saw the conversation go in so many different directions on the platform. We saw home health workers weighing in themselves, giving further anecdotes about it. We had people on the flip side, candidly, we had people saying, look, these are, you know, traditionally we haven't seen so-called housekeeping jobs really, you know, pick up in wages anyway. And then we had other people come in and say, look, this is not just housekeeping. These people are actually keeping very, very valuable people alive for families. So just as conversations on our professional network at LinkedIn go, there are people on all sides of the issue raising decent points. And I think one last point I'll make is that there's this vicious cycle sometimes with some jobs in America where they're perceived as low skill, and therefore a lot of times psychologically they become low paying jobs. But then some people see them as low paying jobs or see that they're low paying jobs and then say, therefore they must be low skill jobs. And there's this vicious cycle that until we break it, a lot of high demand jobs will continue to be low wage jobs here in America.
Well, we know that healthcare for a couple today is going to cost close to $300,000 in retirement. And it used to be when families kind of stayed together, you know, the grandparents would live with the parents, the family, and the family would take care of the elderly grandparents. And that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. So these home care workers are actually serving a very important role. They're kind of trumping or taking the place of that. So it seems like they have a really important place, not only within families, but also society, to say the least.
That's absolutely true. And we're seeing so many dynamics change within families and their views on careers and work. Since the financial crisis, this past decade-long recovery, we've actually seen, as you and I have talked about, Jeff, we've seen women in America recover better, actually, than men of similar age in terms of getting jobs and getting the pay that they were before the crisis. And so if you go back decades, you know, maybe when more women were not working and maybe caring for family members, that has completely changed as well, coinciding with this aging of boomers. And so there's so many, you know, demographic trends paired with, you know, the economic recovery that really, again, create even higher demand for these home health workers.
Yeah. Well, Devin, thanks for bringing this to light. Thanks for the conversation. We're going to have to follow this one closely. Healthcare, obviously a vital part of planning and saving for retirement and your financial future. We'll talk to you soon, Devin. Take care.
You too, Jeff. Bye.
Really interesting story. And when we come back, we're going to talk to a California brewer who's doing a very interesting startup, but feeling the challenges of a tight labor market. Dave McLean from Admiral Maltings will be joining us next, right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network. Welcome back. Dave McLean is the co-founder of Admiral Maltings, one of the first organic breweries in California. He's been a restaurateur and an entrepreneur virtually his entire life, founding many of the successful bars in and around the San Francisco scene. Very pleased now to welcome Dave to talk about the successes and the challenges of running a small business in California. Hey, David, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Jeffrey. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's so great to catch up with you. I enjoyed sitting down with you almost over a year ago for our Road to Retirement series, and really enjoyed the conversation. You had some really interesting history about Haight-Ashbury, but also about the brewing business. So let's just catch up. How are things going with Admiral Maltings? Give us a lowdown and how things are going there.
Things are going really great. Potentially too great at the moment. Our sales have surged. People are really embracing the idea of brewers and distillers are embracing the idea of local, locally made, locally grown, and locally made malt, which is, like I probably mentioned last time we talked, it's somewhat new to everybody around here. There hasn't been an option to get local malt to make truly local beer and spirits. So we're maxed out. We're making malt as fast as we can and can't keep up with some of our sales spikes. And so we're already working on an expansion to add some more capacity so we can make more malt.
Yeah, I want to get to the expansion in a second, but to do your business, do you have to staff workers in multiple shifts? Do they just work 9 to 5? Can you just break that down for our audience a little bit about the business?
Yeah, well, malting and brewing are similar in that they're the batch processes where you're somewhat working at the pace of nature, basically, because in both cases you're managing, in brewing you're managing fermentation and yeast metabolism, and it just, once it starts going, you have to work on its schedule. And malting is pretty similar in that we're germinating grain. We're taking a living kernels of these barley seeds and other grains too, rye and oats and wheat, and we're leveraging what they do because they're trying to grow and become new plants. And so we're managing this process of essentially like controlled germination, controlled sprouting, and so schedule wise, that means that we have to come in at some unusual hours, odd hours, and turn the malt because it builds up heat, and the rootlets start to clump together as it grows, as the kernels start to sprout. So yeah, it's a full shift during the day, and then there's some sort of, somebody has to come in a little later in the evening and just go through the bed of grain and turn it and things like that. We have to work on weekends because it's a like again it's ready when it's ready, and there's
Yeah.
no way to sort of put it on hold and wait. When we're done germinating it, we have to get into the kiln and dry it within a certain amount of time. So it's a 7-day a week production process for sure.
So you're ramping up. You're getting a lot of sales. That's amazing. Congratulations to you. How big is your staff?
Well, it's relatively small. And we have my two partners. One of them, Curtis, is our head maltster, so he's actively part of production, and then he's got 5 maltsters working under him for him, and so that kind of takes care of most of the needs of production and packaging and warehousing and all that.
So, when we were sitting down in your former bar in Haight-Ashbury, we had talked about the challenges of offering benefits. And I think you kind of went into that a little bit. Retirement plans, something that we were talking about to many business owners, something that is oftentimes economically challenging to offer. Is that still, and you now have the new Cal Sabres plan, which just came online on 7/1 of this year. Has your perspective changed on that? Are things changing with respect to Cal Sabres? And are you considering, in terms of offering a retirement plan, is that a benefit you're considering offering your staff and employees?
I think we're still in this startup stage. I mean, we're 2 years in, but it's a process to get up to where we're trying to get. It's certainly our intention, but we've been trying to work on. It's also hard to find staff in the Bay Area right now, and so we're trying to. There are a number of things that we would like to do to become more, just to continue to become a more attractive place to work, and attract and retain the most talented people that we can. And so we've kind of been, over this past year or so, as we've been bringing on a couple more staff members and just trying to develop a team. We have admittedly been focused more on finding room in our budget to pay people more, in their current wages, and offer a few benefits like some paid vacation time and things like that. I think as you start a new business like we did, you sort of start adding on those things ideally as fast as you can. But there's some things that when we talk to our team, there are things that are really important to them right now because they're living in the expensive Bay Area as well. And so any recent new activity since we last talked has been more about kind of getting current wages up to more competitive, and we have instituted some things like vacation pay and things like that. So we haven't quite gotten to the retirement component yet, but it's certainly something that we talk about and we'd like to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can understand, people, vacation time is obviously very important. You've got to ramp up these benefits. What was interesting sitting down with you is you were able to tell us the whole history in, sure, we didn't go into great detail, but we had a period of time to talk about it, of Haight-Ashbury, the Grateful Dead, the history of the bars that you owned, and some of the challenges that small businesses are facing in the Bay Area and specifically Haight-Ashbury. Has that changed at all? It sounds like it's a very tight labor market in California and in the Bay Area, but have things changed at all in the Haight-Ashbury district?
I don't find myself working over there as much anymore, but I do still go by the old places. Magnolia sells, we sell malt to them. They make beer with our malt, so I have to, go by and visit them, and so and I stay in touch with everybody. And I talk to people throughout the industry, probably more now than ever, because I interact with so many other breweries and pubs and restaurants. Breweries that have pubs and restaurants. It's particularly hard on the pub and tasting room and tap room side. Hospitality labor is just in super short supply, just because it's hard for people to live on the kind of wages that a brewery, pub, restaurant can pay. So I don't know that things have changed. I don't think they've gotten worse since we last talked, but they haven't necessarily improved either. It's still really hard to find people, let alone retain them. And so that kind of, it just kind of puts a lot of businesses of the sort of small scale that we're talking about. It puts them in somewhat of a tight spot where, despite the best intentions of wanting to to offer more benefits and things like that. I mean, sometimes it's just a scramble just to keep bodies in the building, you know?
Yeah. And I recall our conversation about the profitability, the margins can be, and I think you're alluding to this, can be challenging for these smaller businesses, especially in the hospitality side. It's just physically and financially impossible to, I think every owner in the hospitality industry wants to do more for their employees. I mean, that's my sense. They want to, as a business owner, they're taking risks, they want to earn a profit, but they want to do something right on behalf of their employees. I think it's just economically and financially very challenging for them.
It is, and it's an industry that's full of really creative and enthusiastic people, just by nature of it. It's people who really love what they do. Want to try to make a career out of making a product or food or whatever that they love, whether it's malt or beer or spirits. And so it can be kind of, to be honest, it can be a little bit of a bummer because it's you have all this enthusiasm and you want to rally a bunch of people around you to try to fight that good fight and do the thing that you're trying to do, and it can be really, it can sap a little bit of the momentum and the enthusiasm when you can't do what you feel like you need to do, because it's an industry full of really good people who have, like you said, really good intentions. I think it's just it's like the harsh reality of one of those things that you don't think about going into it. You're like, I want to make beer, I want to make malt, or I want to, I'm a chef and I want to run a restaurant and feed people, and then you kind of get into some of these things, and it's a puzzle to solve.
But you can't outrun your passions. And if your passion is creating a great brew, or your passion is being an artist, that's your passion. And you can't outrun yourself, I guess, is my point. Is this challenge that in terms of retaining people, that it's not just the Bay Area? I mean, you're talking to other brewers, I'm presuming, around the country. There are associations that most likely you belong to. Is this the sense that talking to other people in other geographic areas of the United States, that they're facing the same types of small business challenges?
Yeah, very much so, but it's certainly certain urban areas, especially the Bay Area, maybe other large urban areas, New York and DC, places like that, seem to just, the cost of living is so much higher for to retain for employees. It seems to be a little exaggerated or extreme in places like here. And if only we could, the big if only that I always think about is if only there was some way to really charge the customer the true cost of paying people fairly. Everybody that goes out to eat and drink and buy beer and spirits and things, like, for the most part, I think in their minds they're not wanting to, they want to buy from companies that are taking care of their employees and doing all the right things, and hopefully environmentally sustainable and things like that. I mean, I think a lot of people are at least enlightened enough to think that way about their purchasing, but it's really hard to it's really hard to pass along the true cost. I think that despite those intentions, those same customers would probably have a really wake up call if, like, you actually passed on the true cost of taking care of labor and things like that, because I just don't think people realize. They think that they see a busy restaurant and they think, oh, that place is making a lot of money, and it's probably not.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. I mean, the net real cost is oftentimes very different than the unit cost that you're charging a consumer, and you have to take into account, because people have choices and they can go down the road to the next establishment or go somewhere else, or they may not be a connoisseur of a fine brew or a fine wine, even though they may fancy themselves that way. And there's that opportunity cost and opportunity that could be lost. So, I think it's a fine line, and obviously, it's more art than probably science, I would imagine.
Yeah. It's one of the harder things to do as a business owner is raise prices. Raise menu prices, or for us, raising malt prices, and because you just you always worry that, like, is this the price increase that is a breaking point for somebody that might lose a few customers, and yet, rent goes up, insurance goes up, labor costs go up, and so, like, you can't keep working with smaller and smaller margins, so you have to raise prices. But it's a hard one to do, and so I think a lot of people hold off, or don't raise prices to the extent maybe that they should, or wish they could, or that the budget tells them to, because it's something you just don't want to. You don't want to be the place that's higher priced than everywhere else, and so it's challenging.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Well, David, it's so great to chat with you. Great to see you. Keep rolling at it. And will Admiral Maltings, will your brew come to here to the East Coast, or are there plans to continue to distribute it just in the California Bay Area? Will you come towards this part of the neck of the woods?
I would never say never, because we do get interest. People do occasionally reach out to us from breweries and distilleries on the East Coast and want to buy some malt from us. But for the most part, we're focusing on California, because a big part of our story is California grown grain for California brewers and distillers, and that being so uncommon or really unheard of in the last 30 or 40 years. There are also 1,000 breweries and 200 distilleries in the state. So given that we're pretty maxed out right now, I think we've got our hands full, but we're always happy to ship malt to somewhere else and watch someone else do something great with it.
Well, it sounds like you're growing. Congratulations. I know that it's been a lot of hard work by you, your co-founders, and the team. Best of luck, and we'll check back with you hopefully sooner than another year.
Sounds good. I look forward to it. Thanks.
Take care, bud. Bye-bye. Well, folks, that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Hey, have a financial or retirement topic you'd love for us to cover? Or maybe someone of interest that you think would be really topical? Drop us a line. And don't forget, check out today's top headlines in this morning's The Morning Pulse. So until tomorrow, keep saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.